searching for you. I'm still searching for you. From dirt to the sky, I'm still searching for you. 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 I'm still from dirt to the sky. I'm still searching for you.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
You disgust me.
Who gives a shit?
Go on.
I made it the fuck up. I did. I did. I did. I did. I did. It's glorious. And I run. Just for fun, 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 just for fun,
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
just for fun, 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 just for fun.
Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian, and welcome to Tuesday with Geeks. How's everybody doing?
Hello.
Catster, stop. just stop. Just stop.
What's up?
How's everybody doing?
I'm doing fine.
All right. Well, we got our guest here tonight, Mildra the Monk. How you doing, sir?
Hello there, folks. Thank you for having me. I enjoy being had.
You enjoy being had? Let's see. Oh, hey, I got a question already. Let's see. Cooking Up Gaming says, since when did hanging out with your friends turn into streamer podcaster material?
Exception of streaming and podcasting.
Pretty much. I mean, but if you want to put it specifically, let me see. My channel's like 4 years old now. So at least for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway. All right. So the Daniel,
Yes.
is that shirt? It's Baby Billy. Oh my God. I fucking love that show, man.
You go outside, nerd. Get. I ain't got time for your worthless chime-ins.
Go outside, nerd. Get out. Go. I ain't got time to be distracted by your worthless chime-ins. Go on.
Yes, I love that. I finally did get to see The Righteous Gemstones, and man, that was a good show.
Yeah, my wife got me this shirt. You got it.
I love it.
Specifically for me to go GM in.
I love it. That's perfect. Well, all right. We asked Mildred to come hang out with us tonight because this guy wrote something pretty cool. I mean, I'm sure a lot of folks out there have been waiting for something like this, but you wrote a Final Fantasy role-playing game.
Yes.
All right. So my first question, and I don't mean to sound insulting or anything like that if I ask you this, but is this like a legitly licensed Final Fantasy role playing game?
This is and always has been a fan project.
Okay.
It was designed as a fan project when I started it 4 years ago, based on an idea that would not leave my head, and it is going to remain that. In fact, even as we speak, it is completely free on itch.io, and it will remain that way.
Cool.
I know that there's been some who are like, "Oh, you're gonna get struck on this." I debuted the alpha for this project at Sage last year.
Mm-hmm.
Sage is Sonic Amateur Games Expo, and it started out as just a thing for Sonic fan games, and over the years since has expanded. And this is technically the first tabletop RPG to make its appearance at Sage. It's a bit of a story as to how that happened, but the point is, there have been other incarnations of trying to do Final Fantasy in tabletop form in one form or another, going all the way back to the mid-90s. So if somebody was to attack me on that, they'd have to answer how all these other ones are still available in various corners of the internet.
Yeah, that's fair. The only thing we've ever really seen that is pretty close to it is the game that Ironcaster and I are currently playing, which Daz Wolfen is, which is Fabula Ultima.
I am familiar with Fabula Ultima. I did interview Rooster Emma some time ago, and I did a review on it, which has made a bit of a stir in some places because of some of the comments I made and some of the gaslighting that happened regarding the comments I made.
Oh.
But that is another story. Because I do intend on revisiting my review of Fabula Ultima that I did several months ago. When I did it originally, all that was available was the core book.
Mm-hmm.
The High Fantasy Atlas had only just come out.
Yeah, that's a good book.
And now that all of the Atlas books are out, I'm considering revisiting that just with new info and to refine some of the comments I made at the time.
Well, if you ever want, some firsthand experience playing it, we've got slots open, or you can just talk to me or Ironcaster about it, because we're definitely invested in it at this point.
Yeah,
we like it.
I've gone ahead and pocketed my old school Essentials game to switch over to running it for a while, and I'm enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah. I will state this regarding my take, because I am coming at something like Fabula Ultima with a much different perspective. As someone who is very familiar with the TTRPG scene within Japan and how that vastly differs from the States or even Europe, but also someone for whom the idea of a console-style RPG in tabletop form is not a new concept to me. And the big criticism that I had with Fabula Ultima had to deal with a presentation thing. It builds itself on live out your JRPG fantasy, but up until the Atlas books came about, it was not quite hitting the mark if you weren't doing that particular brand of Japanese steampunk. Because
it's kind of fair, actually.
I had said at the time, if your JRPG fantasy is something more akin to Wild Arms or more akin to Star Ocean or even something akin to Valkyrie Profile, you're going to struggle with adapting. That's not to say you can't do it. I mean, enough homebrew, you can do just about anything. But it's a matter of how much work before you become a unpaid backseat designer. The Bethesda effect, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, nowadays with the Atlas of natural fantasy, Atlas, you could literally start playing Delicious and Dungeon episodes if you wanted to.
Although I have seen, it's funny you mentioned Delicious and Dungeon because there was one narrative that I've seen people put about that anime that I've had to put to bed multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
That being that it was D&D inspired.
No.
If anything, it was wizardry inspired because I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the history of TTRPGs in Japan, but D&D hasn't had a major foothold over there in decades.
Oh no,
Arguably
no,
since the mid '80s.
Yeah, their big thing is Sword World, and that was Record of Lodoss War made that popular.
Not exactly. Record of Lodoss War and Sword World kind of, it wasn't a case where one led to the other. Because for a while they had nothing to do with each other aside from the fact that they both came from Group SNE. Originally Record of Lodoss War started as a replay that was published in Dragon Magazine, and all the original replays are fully translated. You can get them.
Yeah, I've seen them.
And they originally did want to make it an official D&D campaign setting, but TSR wasn't willing to play ball. For what reason, no one knows for certain. Some say that TSR didn't answer their calls. Some say there was a language barrier issue. This was TSR in the mid-'80s, so I mostly blame Lorraine Williams.
Oh, yeah.
But chances are it's because they couldn't own the IP.
Add it to the pile.
Yep.
Kadokawa owned all the stuff regarding Lodoss. Kadokawa owned, and that's the parent company of Group SNE. It was just that TSR wasn't willing to play ball for whatever reason. So what they ended up doing is making their own RPG called Record of Lodoss War Companion, and that was made more for people who had a video game background.
Our Lady of Pain.
Whereas Sword World was made for people who had a TTRPG background. But both of them were made by SNE to account for two different audiences. The only reason Lodoss got folded into Sword World was as we get closer to the latter part of the 90s, TTRPGs started to lose a lot of momentum to trading card games.
Oh, yeah.
And Lodoss War Companion started to do less and less well, but Sword World was still doing relatively well at the time. So the idea was to just move it over, and thus the Lodoss War Guide was put out. And that's why the whole Lodoss leading the Sword World isn't correct. The other thing that I've seen a lot of people say is that Lodoss beat out D&D. If there was a game that beat out D&D, and is one of the big reasons D&D doesn't have a foothold in Japan at the same level, it's actually Tunnels and Trolls.
Huh.
We're talking predominantly fantasy TTRPGs here, aren't we?
Yeah.
From what I understand, and then this may not be accurate, but from what I've heard, far and away the largest tabletop role-playing game in Japan is actually Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
That is true. And I've seen some people make technical jokes as to why, but I have a different theory as to why Call of Cthulhu caught on so well in Japan, to the point where there are Japanese exclusive replays, modules, and expansions. There was, even by the time it came out, there was already a very strong mystery fiction subculture in Japan, especially helped by a man who was known by the pen name of Ranpo Edogawa, who he really made his name by translating the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Edgar Allan Poe into Japanese, and later parlayed that into being a detective fiction writer. And he had a recurring character that he wrote a lot of his fiction about, and a recurring group called the Boy Detectives Club that inadvertently became the nickname for the fan group that surrounded his work. And For those of you who've seen the anime Case Closed, the character name of Conan Edogawa is a direct nod to Edogawa Ranpo. That's always been my theory.
It's an interesting theory. I've always thought of it kind of, because cyberpunk was always a big. It really, let's be honest, even though it came from Western novels where novels and short stories is where it originated. I mean, cyberpunk really took off hardcore in Japan during the 80s and early 90s economic bubble.
Big time.
I always thought of Call of Cthulhu taking a huge, and I guess you could say it's tangentially tentacle related, but I always thought that Call of Cthulhu really gained a strong foothold in Japan. This was just my thoughts. Like I said, it's not I don't really have any research or surveys to back this up, but I always kind of thought of it, cyberpunk, especially in anime, took two really strong diverging paths. So you had the hardcore cybernetics technology side when you start looking at things like Bubblegum Crisis and the more mechanical side, Guyver, that sort of thing. And then you have when you look at things like Akira, or you start looking into your ultra-violent stuff like Genocyber and that sort of thing, you have that biotechnical body horror, cosmic, pseudo-cyberpunk cosmic horror of things like, strange spiritualism that came into it that just plays beautifully, not only into the Cthulhu mythos, but also plays beautifully into the way, especially the early editions of Call of Cthulhu in the 80s and 90s, really the aesthetic that game portrayed. To me, if you told me, hey, I want you to run an Akira tabletop game, I wouldn't pick up Cyberpunk. I sure as hell wouldn't pick up D&D. I'd reach straight for Call of Cthulhu.
I can see where that comes from, but when it comes to a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, one of the big patient zeros with that is an OVA series that was an experiment built off of a failure known as Megazone 23. Megazone 23 was supposed to be an OVA series. They was supposed to be actually not an OVA series. It was supposed to be a 12-episode anime, but they essentially ran out of money. They repurposed what they had into a set of OVAs. And keep in mind, OVAs was a very novel concept, and they didn't think it was going to do all that well. It was just, hey, we'll put this on this burgeoning home video market. Maybe it'll do something. Maybe it won't.
There were a lot of those.
It ended up doing gangbusters.
That turned into OVAs.
It ended up doing gangbusters, and that was what kicked off the OVA boom of the 80s and early 90s. Some parts of Megazone 23 were attempted to be repurposed into a Robotech movie, which only showed up once in a theater in Texas and was never seen again. Much like Robotech 3000 was shown, got a trailer and then was never seen or heard from again. But some of the elements of Japanese tabletop did bring themselves into what I designed when I designed Legend Edition, because it started out with a idea. I wanted something that was doing Final Fantasy, but was not trying to limit itself to just what was already present, because I didn't want to be pushing a boulder up a hill, but something that could be just as viable regardless of which style you go with. I specifically said I wanted something that didn't just have to skew towards the more steampunky approach of, say, 6, because a lot of the previous ones that were out there, and I covered a bunch of them when I did a review series called FF Week on my channel, they very much skew towards the SNES era. Which, don't get me wrong, I like 4, 5, and 6. I enjoy parts of Mystic Quest. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
Yes.
But I'm also aware that you have whole generations who are more partial to the PS1 era, or more partial to the PS2 or PS3 era. there's going to be a whole generation for whom the likes of 14, 15, and 16 are going to be their entry points. And I feel like they should be accounted for just as much as what came before. As well as if someone wants to take that and go in a completely different direction that I haven't even thought of yet. And that led me down this 4-year journey with a few of my friends to put this together. What's currently on itch is what I consider feature complete. There are still some kinks to iron out, and InDesign screwed us on a few spots. But the thing of it is, I'm not planning on adding anything more than what's already there, just refining what is there. Because there's already enough as is. Between the 3 core books, you're talking about nearly 800 pages worth of content.
How much?
Nearly 800 pages.
Condor levels.
Yeah, except
4 words and actually readable.
I was about to say, yeah, except that I'm pretty sure Mildra actually put like an index and a table of contents and probably hyperlinks.
And has more than 50 words per page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
of that.
Actually, you kind of touched on it a little there. I actually have a question about that, thinking about the Final Fantasy aspect of things. Because, I'm a Final Fantasy ended at Final Fantasy 7 guy. That's really my philosophy on Final Fantasy is the series ended at 7 and you can't.
I will note this. I don't want to get into any which one is better kind of debates, because that would be a bit of a distraction for this kind of thing, honestly.
Yeah, that's not where I'm going. But I'm just using that to kind of set this up. But it's not really even a matter of debate that Final Fantasy has it almost has defined segments or defined regions, if you will, that it progresses through, where it's almost like the games are not even really similar anymore. So
that was always the plan.
Yeah. When I hear Final Fantasy tabletop role playing game, what I think is that when I sit down and play this, not I'm going to play a Final Fantasy skinned D&D. I'm thinking, am I going to get the Final Fantasy feel when I play the game? But when you have those very clearly defined breaks in that series where each, these games feel different than these games feel different than these games, what did you do to kind of go through and kind of, as you said, you want to pay kind of homage and give some play to all of the different people, all the different Final Fantasy fans, whether they came in at 11 or they came in at 14 or they came in at 3 or they came in at 1 or whatever. What did you do to kind of tie those together to make it feel like Final Fantasy to everybody, regardless of where they started?
Well, that's actually answered very, very quickly on the itch page, which as an aside, I really should have linked for those who are curious.
I was going to ask.
So I'm gonna put that in, and T-shirt, you can link that in.
Got you covered.
Right. Good job.
Might be best to have that pinned if at all possible. But before my co-writer Xanatrix and myself even wrote any rules, one of the first things that we did was establish what would become our pillars. And the pillars are not just a buzzword. Every single thing in the games reflects these pillars in one form or another. And if it doesn't reflect those pillars, we didn't put them in. And we laid that out very quickly. It's on page 7 of the core book, and some of it is alluded to on the itch page. These pillars are essentially the Rome that all roads lead to for us. And the first one, the most important one, was mythos over setting. because multiple times I have been asked what Final Fantasy that this is based on. The answer is all of them and none of them. What we did was we looked at certain recurring elements, certain recurring themes and whatnot, and used that to build a sandbox that people can take in any direction they want. An analogy we often use is the blue bucket of Legos, as opposed to having a Lego playset. Unless you were stuck with Mega Blocks, or bastards. Things like crystals, the different types of magic and the different colors of different types of magic, recurring spell names, recurring ships like the Enterprise or the Invincible, the whole presence of airships, recurring creatures like bombs or cactuars, recurring races or the likes like Moogles, even a guy named Sid showing up in some form.
I was gonna ask if you had a Sid.
And those sort of things were the key, were the core part that everything else springs from. We are not writing any kind of setting. There is no setting within the book. What we have instead is a toolkit for people to take in whatever direction they wish to. So if somebody wants to do the more futuristic approaches, there's tools in play for that. If they want,
close your Pornhub tab.
I don't have a Pornhub tab open.
If they want to do the more class, if they want to do high fantasy, they have that approach. If they want to do a mix, which I would say is key to the experience, as opposed to what a lot of people think. We even have a section in one of the books called the Myth of Roots regarding this, because I need you all to understand one thing. Sorry, my model went a bit spastic for a moment. I just had to switch things. When we say that we look through everything regarding FF, we do mean everything. This is meant to be a Final Fantasy game, not the Final Fantasies that I happen to like. And that included looking at every single game that's been released, looking at a lot of the side material, looking at things like manga, looking at the Ultimania strategy guides, even going as far as looking at cut content and interviews. Not just with the likes of like Sakaguchi or the like, but even people like Hiroyuki Ito, who is one of the unsung heroes of Final Fantasy. Things like the active time battle system and the job system were his babies. And that was the level of research that we intended to do. And
this is an actual. These are pages from your book, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. I'm seeing quite a bit of Final Fantasy Tactics poking right out to me, which is awesome.
I like the layout and the aesthetic of it. It's real nice.
The aesthetic is great.
The layout is a lot of the race, class, and job art I commissioned personally, and I was very hands-on with the process regarding the vision that I had in mind, as well as a few images in the equipment section for different types of weapons that I wanted to put in, and the rest is just filler art. The key thing is that we wanted to go with a more strategy guide like look. Something more akin to the strategy guides that say Brady Games put out back in the day, or
I see that.
Ultimania series of the official Ultimania strategy guides for different Square games.
Yeah,
well,
good format.
I'll give it some credit. Half this book isn't just saying go to a website to find out more information. Like the I believe Final Fantasy 8 or 9 strategy guide.
It was 9 that did that. That was the whole play online thing, because a lot of people didn't quite know what to do with this newfangled internet thing. Keep in mind, FF9 came out in 1999. So there was a lot of. So we're still in the age. We're still in the same span of years that of like the web enhancement gimmick that D&D Third Edition tried back in the day.
Mhm.
So, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying context is key. And I think the fact that they never did that again says that the lesson was learned.
So I did have another question for you. Have you had a chance to look at the Final Fantasy 14 quote unquote role playing game?
I have. I did a impressions video on the starter set. I am planning on covering the full book in time.
Because
what I will say with that game is the game that it reminded. I know a lot of people have been saying, it's a 5e thing that was changed at the last minute, which is not true, especially since some of the developers came from one of the larger RPG publishers in Japan, Far East Amusement Research. It is a very Japanese game in terms of its styling. And this is one of those things that is important to keep in mind when you're dealing with Japanese tabletop. Long-form campaigns are kind of in the minority in terms of design. They're not real. A lot of them are very much designed for shorter episodic or one-shot affairs. This is largely due to the fact that a lot of players are playing in like a rented karaoke room or something like that, where time is at a premium. Something that is equally important to note. I know for a lot of us, there's the whole history of that TTRPGs evolved out of the wargaming scene from the 1970s, which in North America, obviously that's true. But not so much in Japan. In Japan, it evolved more out of the computer gaming scene. And some early pioneers on that were games like GURPS and Traveler, especially since Traveler had the whole CD-ROM thing. And you had magazines like Comptique, which, even though they had TTRPG content in them, including replays, they were mostly a computer gaming magazine. Hence the name Comptique, a fusion of computer and boutique.
Okay, right quick, I gotta point something out that I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of figured you'd have Sora on this, but I'm really surprised you put Sion Barzad in there, because I feel like I'm one of the only people who's actually played the bouncer.
I still have my copy of it.
I do in my closet somewhere. I'm not sure I can get my old PS2 to boot up anymore, but I remember playing that game when it came out. I enjoyed it.
We wanted to be thorough, and we also wanted to show that this is a system that can handle other games.
I like how when you look at the art here, which I don't know if you just took the art assets directly from the original games, but I do like how each one, if it's a reproduction, mimics those games. Because I look at Tara Bradford and I'm like, this is straight out of the instruction manual for Final Fantasy.
It's actually from Dissidia.
From where?
From Dissidia, which was a series of Final Fantasy fighting games that started on the PSP and then got a PS4.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
The design with the characters in that was meant to be a midway point between Amano's art style and Nomura's, because even with modern tech, it would be all but impossible to try and do the art styles of Yoshitaka Amano in 3D.
True.
But there are 3 books in total. The core book, the Enemy Intel Field Guide, which is where the full bestiary is, and the Ultimania Guide, which has some of the expanded material that we couldn't put in the core book.
Uh-oh. There you go, Caster. There's the high wind. Caster's character in our Fabula Ultima game is pretty much Sid Highwind.
Which one?
Good question. Caster?
I see his avatar moving, but I don't hear a thing.
Oh, I don't know why I was muted. That was weird. Though not my intention. I just wanted to make an airship pilot, navigator. So I guess 7. But I actually did want to ask, with what you were saying with Japanese role-playing games in mind, is this something meant to be more for longer-term campaigns or for the shorter term? What was your intent?
My intent was, if you want to do it one shot, you can. If you want to do it long term, you can. That is some. A lot of this is left up to the table because, again, it is built on creating that blue bucket of Legos more than anything else. And I will finish off my thought when it came to FF14. I feel it is going to be a divisive affair, but the game that I was reminded of the most when I went through it is a game that I've covered on my channel in the past called Emberwind, which is made by Nomnivore Games. Both in terms of how its combat works, how its story structure works, and several elements of design. There's some thematic similarities between the two, and I might have a little bit of bias because of the fact that, again, Emberwind was developed by a friend of mine. Though saying a certain game that I talk about is one that I've done an interview with is a bit redundant because I do a lot of interviews. I talk with a lot of devs. Like the playlist that I have on my channel is over 1,000 videos long.
Oh gosh.
And that's over the course of 5 years. But the thing is, I remember doing a post on the itch page about the philosophical difference between the FF14 TTRPG and what I'm doing. The FF14 one is just focused on doing FF14 and doing it in a particular way. And I did find out that the game was in Japan for a bit of time before coming stateside, which lends even more credence to my set of theories.
It came across to me as an attempt to recreate the experience of fighting a boss fight in the MMO at the table. Which
you can do. You can do the boss fight thing is there, as well as smaller scale things. They have the concept of doing fates in it. Something that I've gradually learned when it comes to examining different Japanese TTRPGs is each one of them is singular focused on emulating a specific thing. I remember before we went live, Caster, you had brought up talk of Kamen Rider, and I'd like to bring up one game that a lot of people misinterpreted early on, and that's Convictor Drive. A lot of people sold Convictor Drive on the idea of it being Kamen Rider, the TTRPG. That element is certainly there, but that isn't completely accurate. Because it is only accurate if you're solely thinking of Kamen Rider Fives, which is a very tech-based affair. But I have on Word of God that Iron Man was also a major inspiration, as well as the Metal Heroes series of tokusatsu, especially the Space Sheriff trilogy. And it is tailor-built for its particular world of its tokusatsu flavored sci-fi vision of Yokohama. In that same regard, a game like Double Cross is solely focused on its particular brand of mutant superheroics, and it isn't really interested in doing anything else but that. And this is an approach that I've taken as well, because I do not consider Legend Edition necessarily to be a TTRPG with a Final Fantasy coat of paint. I consider it the other way around. This is my attempt at taking the mythos of Final Fantasy and turning it into a TTRPG. And building around genre emulation as opposed to expectations of a TTRPG. Sometimes the two things align, but that is just because it was a natural matter of course rather than what I need to do.
So, the only place that one can travel visa-free from Utah.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge in trying to tackle the, Herculean franchise that is Final Fantasy into tabletop games? Because there's so much of it that you could try to bring in. And what did you feel had to be cut that you might have wanted to put in initially?
Sometime now, because of the fact that we were building on some of the different RPGs that came out of the Returners project, which was started back in 1994, we had some things to draw upon. And I've also mentioned that one of the big mechanic inspirations is Legend System by Rule of Cool, and which started as a 3E hack in the Test of Spite arena on Giant in the Playground before evolving into its own beast, which there is precedent for that kind of thing. I mean, that's pretty much how Rollmaster got started, as well as Castles and Crusades. Now, a bunch of house rules that became their own game. And because of that, it became more about establishing, okay, what are our pillars? How can we take what already exists and bring them within those pillars, and what isn't going to fit? So there was a lot of us throwing things at the wall and then gradually paring things down. There were a few jobs that did not make the cut. For example, the Puppet Master job from 11. This was one we had considered at one point, but we gradually realized that everything that the Puppet Master does was accounted for in one of our other jobs, and because of the way the job system works in the game, if it's cutting into someone else's territory, we weren't going to use it. And a couple more recent examples are the two jobs that were introduced in Dawn Trail, the Viper and the Pictomancer.
Mm-hmm.
The Viper, well, we don't really design jobs around weapons because of how we did weapons. So a lot of the stuff with the Viper was handled by jobs like the Dervish. And the Pictomancer, a lot of its stuff was just what we were already doing with the Black Mage anyways. So I didn't see a reason to. And the Pictomancer in 6, I know some people are going to bring that up. We already have that. That's basically a mimic with extra steps, and we already have one of those.
Follow-up question: was the Blue Mage included or no?
Yes,
because I know there is a whole subsect of fans who go gaga for the Blue Mage class.
The Blue Mage is now something I need to make clear. Did you see how we handle classes and jobs within the game?
I've been kind of starting to go over it over the course of the stream here, so I haven't gotten too deep into it yet.
So this is something that I need to establish so you can understand where my head was at when it came to job design. Technically speaking, we only have 4 classes: Warrior, Expert, Mage, Adept. All that they are concerned with is how you develop HP, MP, and how many skills you have trained at the start, as well as 1 limit break. You, in addition to that, are picking 3 jobs that you're developing on a slow, medium, and fast rate of progression with a 3-level stagger. Any of these, there are a lot of jobs to pick from. Any 3 are available. The only rule is at least one of them has to be associated with your class. Now, the blue mage is a adept associated job, and it is a lot of the learning from enemies is very much a thing with them. They are the only one who can, technically speaking, cast any spell of their spell list that they know. The catch is, of course, unlike all the other casters, you are not getting spells by leveling up.
I have to ask a kind of an obvious and silly question, but I'm assuming that the summoner class is in there.
Yes,
because that's the one everybody's favorite. Because I mean, I think everybody out there wants to summon Bahamut at least once, or Ifrit.
We have summoning in 2 forms, and both of them are mage associated jobs. We have the summoner, which its particular summons are more akin to the way summoners have worked in the MMOs, where it's a companion. The reason I did that is because, for all intents and purposes, the summon in several of the games, with a few exceptions, is just a jumped up spell. And I didn't find that interesting enough. I would rather have summon have its own identity besides just being another spell list in all but name.
I mean,
the other entry is the yokai. Now, yokai originally was supposed to be the controllable summon a la 10 and 13. But then I looked at, and I will note the yokai is, the original concept comes from Bravely Second. There were a few jobs that are a nod to Bravely Second, because, well, that was done by the same team that did the 4 Heroes of Light on the DS, so I am technically correct in adding it in. But the idea with the yokai is that they channel an eidolon through their own bodies, essentially becoming an avatar for that eidolon. And I know some people say, did you copy that from 16? No, we ended up writing that out about a year before 16 came out. I was drawing upon the design of Yoko, the person who has the yokai asterisk in Bravely Second, and the avatar tuners in Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga.
Ooh, okay, that's one I'm familiar with.
Well, it sounds almost similar to what I was looking at. Was where is Terra? At least as far as I know, because I only was a 1 through 7 kind of guy. Terra is in a lot of ways unique with her Esper form transformation morph ability.
Mm-hmm.
That does sound.
We already have that answered within the chapter on classes and jobs, as well as a section in the Ultimania guide that T-shirt had showed on stream earlier. We go through a bunch of characters and and the class and job combination that might be associated with them. For example, Cloud. The setup we go with is warrior class and the jobs of weapon master, knight, and sword saint. So to bring up Terra, if I can, let me find it for a moment. Here we are. We went with the mage class and gave the jobs Chocobo Knight, Scholar, and Yokai of Cerberus. Now, something to keep in mind is we design a lot of these as open to interpretation and reinterpretation. And the thing about the yokai is when you take that job, you pick an eidolon that you channel. This does mean that yokai is the only job you can take more than once, but you can't assume multiple avatar forms, and you are giving yourself a lot of disadvantages if you choose to double or triple down on yokai transformation. You can do it, but every action you do comes with a price when it comes to character creation and character advancement.
Oh, Das, you've been kind of quiet, man. You got anything to say?
I just realized I've been muted.
Yes, you've been muted. You've been muted the entire time. I thought, oh well, he must have some background noise or something going on in the back. So, you've been real quiet. Anything you got to say?
Is there's just a limit of 3 jobs, correct? That you can take?
There is, for the most part, yes, there is one exception, and that is the full buy-in rule. This allows you to take an additional medium job. The catch is you will get significantly less slots when it comes to magic items as you develop.
Okay.
So
that was the only question I had off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, it's a question.
It is an option, but because of the way we have jobs, it also means that each individual job has to be far more focused. Because, again, every character is a combination of 3 or 4 of them. This has resulted in some moves that did get us some pushback, like Paladins not also gaining limited white magic. And the reason I did that was because I felt cover was more key to the Paladin identity than white magic was. That, and when you can take Paladin and White Mage and do that particular fantasy along with one other job. The idea of half casters in some fantasy games is kind of redundant because there's so many other. If you want to dip into spellcasting but don't want to take a spellcasting job, there's multiple ways you can do it, be it through consumables or magic items. So the idea of like a half caster that you might see in D&D or the like, there's no need to do it, and trying to do it would actually create more problems.
Okay.
That being said, if someone's really insistent that using the job setup isn't quite enough to replicate FF6, we do have within the advanced rules in the core book some material for emulating Magicite.
I have kind of another weird question. Final Fantasy II, which was what I played, it was on the Super Nintendo, and I know it's not actually part 2. It's like what, part 6 or something?
4.
4? Is it part 4? Okay. You start the class out, or you start the game out as a Dark Knight class, I think, Black Knight class.
Dark Knight.
And then you get flipped over to Paladin partway through the story. Is there like a mechanic for that in the book?
There isn't a hard and fast mechanic for it, but there are suggestions regarding it. The simple way to do that is just swapping out one of the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
All that you'd be doing if you're going from being a Dark Knight to being a Paladin is you lose Dark Knight and you gain Paladin, and just gain whatever circles you already had unlocked at that level. That's really it. And the thing is, all the jobs unlock their features through a series of degrees known as circles, and where they are in the hierarchy of fast, medium, and slow determines at what level you're going to unlock them. But it's always at those particular levels. So, for example, the fast job unlocks its circles at 1st, 3rd, 6th, 9th, 10th, not 10th, 12th, 15th, and 18th. There are always 7 circles, and if you're doing the fast job, you'll always unlock the circles at those levels. No exceptions. With the medium, it's 1st, then 4th, then it's every third level afterwards. And with slow, it's second, and then 3 levels each afterwards up to 20th. There is no past 20th level. 20th is the cap.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I mean, we had a discussion about this earlier in the day about how difficult it is to actually make a game that's based on an IP. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. We're talking about anything from like the Alien role-playing game to the Star Wars role-playing game to the Dune role-playing game or even the Space 1999 role-playing game. So similarly, I would think running a game of Final Fantasy, even with a really good set of rules like yours, would still be kind of daunting just because you have player expectations going into the game. Like if they're super hardcore, Final Fantasy nerds, and I say that with all, endearingness. But I mean, if they're all sitting at the table and they're waiting for you to run a Final Fantasy game and they're expecting a Final Fantasy game and you run something that is kind of not what they were expecting, I don't know. Would you think that would be kind of a little difficult on the GM or maybe even on the players?
On one hand, I can see where you're coming from on that, but I would say that's no more or less difficult than any game with a mythos surrounding it. It's no different than if somebody was to run a game within the Modern Knights and Vampire, or within the Third Imperium and Traveler, or along the Jump Roads and Fading Suns, and on I can go, of these games that have very, very strongly established settings.
Yeah, because one of my problems is I'm not that big of a Final Fantasy guru. I mean, yeah, I've dipped my toes in several of the games. I've actually played Final Fantasy X all the way through, beginning to end, and I loved it, and I cried through just about all the ending and everything in the middle.
Well, but the thing is, though, T-shirts.
Yeah.
With Final Fantasy as a brand, has so many standalone, unique storylines and worlds of its own. It's like Dungeons and Dragons in a way. It's easy to run something in that because there's so many unique worlds to it that no one is expecting you to stay truly accurate to that's how the only way this D&D can be run.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, like I said, I said earlier today, it's like, I had an ex-girlfriend who I ran a Star Wars game for, and her comment at the end of the game was, well, I guess nobody's still run a Star Wars game for me. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, this wasn't what I was expecting.
At that point, that goes beyond anything that I can account for as a designer, and that's a table problem.
Yeah, it really is.
Star Wars is a bad example of that, because Star Wars, regardless of whether you're EU or Disney or original or anything, or the games, LucasArts games or anything like that, it's literally all the same galaxy far, far away. Final Fantasy is, 14 now? Completely different, separate worlds. And just like D&D, you have Greyhawk, you have Planescape, you have Dark Sun, you have Forgotten Realms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Here's the big difference, though. We designed from the word go that this is setting agnostic.
Ah, okay.
A big criticism I have had with D&D over the years is that it does not know whether it wants to shit or get off the pot regarding whether or not it is setting agnostic or whether or not it has a setting. And that is one of those things that when you try and play both sides of it, it ends up creating problems. I did a whole 20-minute video about my issues with the Vancian model of spellcasting that's been used over the years. And one of the big problems I stated is within most of the books, regardless of edition. I know somebody's going to try and bring up some implied thing that Gygax said, but I'm talking about in the damn books. I never saw a strong enough in-universe reason for why that method of spellcasting is used. I have out-of-universe reasons, like the ancestry with chainmail, or the fact that Gygax and Artisan were fans of Jack Vance's work, But again, those are out of universe reasons. Whereas I pick up, say, Shadowrun, and Shadowrun has the whole spell drain thing with its magic. And the answer to that is very simple. Using magic tires you out. I pick up Legend of the Five Rings. I already know why its magic works the way it does. You are asking the elemental kami for a favor, and you can only do that so much. So on. And I'm not saying that you need a defined setting, but you need to pick a lane. You either have a defined setting and you build around it, or you do not have a defined setting and you build around creating a sandbox. You cannot do both. We firmly put our line in the sand and saying we are presenting a collection of tools for you to use as the foundation for whatever setting you want to build.
Okay. I mean, that's good. We do have some questions out here from the audience. Let's see. Savo says, what systems are to be used? Dice? If so, what kind? Are probabilities curved or logarithmic? Just technical things, I think.
Even though the core die mechanic is a D20, when it comes to what system are to be used, I'm assuming there's the question of whether or not I'm using an existing system. That is not the case. Everything this is not something where you could make it compatible with D&D or Savage Worlds or whatnot without doing a lot of work, because it is built to do its thing and nothing else. Yes, we drew upon some very D&D adjacent games, but a lot of stuff got filed off from those games to do our particular goal, which is emulating Final Fantasy. So it is a standard D20 plus modifiers kind of thing, but when it comes comes with the probabilities and all of that. And I've looked at a lot of the bell curve arguments, and if I'm being honest, the bell curve arguments that people make with different games put me to sleep. My dear friend, co-writer and editor-in-chief, and he will insist on being called editor-in-chief, had talked about when a statistician, a legit statistician, looked at the different types of bell curves in different TTRPGs. And his conclusion was that the different bell curves are not sufficiently significant as far as the comparison between the two. In terms of what you get out of them, I'm not saying that they're all the same, but the difference between them, there's not one that has a sufficient enough advantage over another. It all comes down to preference. You can prefer a D100 or a D20 or you could prefer even using cards for your games, or no dice at all if you so choose. But whenever someone says, oh, instead of using a D20, you should use a 2D10, I'm like, because bell curve, and I'm just like, yeah, miss me with all that. I well and truly do not care. And when it comes to even with that, the thing is, the reason we used the D20 was just because with all the other stuff that we were doing, I wanted to keep the core mechanic relatively straightforward. Because there was going to be some out of the box thinking outside of that. One particular thing that we've gotten some pushback on is our choice to not use grid combat.
Oh boy.
Based system. And the reason we went with that is, one, genre emulation. Two, I didn't see a sufficient enough reason that I needed grid combat. If somebody else wants to make it, they're fine to do that, but I wanted to use the space that would have been taken up by that to do other things. Things like the way weapon customization works, or the way we have spells work, or just freeing things up, so that one doesn't have to design a whole set piece or a whole dungeon. And
okay, that does actually bring up an interesting question. since this is kind of basically like a project, a labor of love, as it were, and not for profit, I'm kind of surprised you were getting much pushback from it. I mean, I would guess that the Final Fantasy fan base is like every other fan base, and they can be very vocal and they can be very opinionated. But were you getting a lot of pushback on your choices and things? Or?
We got pushback on a few, but it was built more on this idea that some had that we had, and this is a trap that I see a lot of people do when they want to try and adapt an IP into TTRPG form, is this idea that you need to take literally everything from the source material.
No.
One of the people in my server, Ethereal Dragon, hi Dragon, I know you're watching this, was attempting to write a Common Writer RPG, and he got it in his head that he needed to take everything from the existing seasons.
Oh my god!
I had said absolutely not. You're going to be Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill for eternity trying to do that, because by the time you finish, another season's going to come out, and you're going to be right back where you started.
It's almost like trying to build a Godzilla RPG.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That franchise gets to the point of rewriting reality with the power scale.
We already have RPGs you can do Godzilla. There's Mecha versus Kaiju, and there's Titans of Fallen Earth. So
Titans of Fallen Earth is going to be good when it comes out.
I've done interviews on the matter, and there's been other kaiju themed TTRPGs, but I have heard that before of, if you're doing like Godzilla, you need to do all of it. And like, I don't think that's what people want. I think people just want a stompy kaiju affair. So give them that, and the rest will naturally follow.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. There's also Everyday Heroes with the.
Yeah, I know Everyday Heroes. I've interviewed Trent over that multiple times. I even
with the Kong and the Pacific Rim source books.
Yeah, and right now they're doing Return of the Living Dead.
Oh dear.
They've done that. They've done The Crow. They've done Highlander. They've done Rambo. They've done Universal Soldier. Even Escape from New York.
Yeah. We mentioned them this morning. What were you saying?
Oh, now T-shirt has to buy it for sure.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of zombie role-playing games I don't own, because A, I've not heard of them, or B, there's just a lot of them. But yeah, zombies are definitely one of my favorite genres, especially when it's done right.
Do you have All Flesh Must Be Eaten?
That's one of the ones I don't have.
That honestly surprises me, because that's kind of the definitive zombie RPG for many years.
You would think so.
Expansions.
Well, you would think so, but I don't think it would hold up to the game that Ralts created and I helped work on, which was Year of the Zombie, which is no longer in print and is hella hard to find. I happen to have backup copies of all the material because I worked on it, but that was a hell of a good zombie game.
I am quite familiar with Year of the Zombie.
Well, there you go.
But I try to something I try to emphasize is variety. I don't want any one game to be treated as the one game that someone has to use for a certain genre. I'm glad to see that I'm seeing more and more games that are doing the cyberpunk meets fantasy, so you don't have to use Shadowrun for that if you don't want to.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the thing, the gaming market is so big, and it's almost kind of shallow, I would say, just because of the fact that aside from a few really, really big companies that shake the rest of the market whenever they move, there's lots of room for little independent guys to make their own products and try to market and sell them. and some of them do a really great job at it, and some of them sell their 800
my brother in Christ, you are the marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I was going to say, some of them sell 800-page documents for $36 and call that done.
Look, I've stated that if people want that kind of thing to change, then people need to step up, and instead of making excuses.
Yeah.
And I have thousands of reasons why I've been doing exactly that. And I've referred to the way people view D&D, and I see what Savo had stated in the chat as when it comes to I've referred to it as a kind of brain rot, and I've seen people some of the pushback has come from people trying to apply D&D isms onto what we have, or apply the idea that there are certain things that needed to be done. One of the big ones was the way we handle money is more an abstract thing with the stake system, as opposed to having a guild cost. And the reason for that was, if you're dealing with different settings, some things are going to be more expensive than other things. So I didn't see a reason to put set costs on things like that. Especially since it allowed me to do things like the merchant job that can have fun with that system. And I mean, for example, the merchant is the one that has guild toss. But there were some who were like, can you put a standard GP system or something like that? I'm like, why? For tradition? I've stated many times over the years that I don't like tradition for its own sake. If I'm going to do something in a design, it's because it's the right idea, not because of tradition or expectations or whatnot. But just this seems like the right idea for what the design goal is supposed to be. That's why I brought up those pillars.
Oh, I always hate shopping trip RPG myself, but but actually, I got to credit Daniel for this, because we were talking about zombie stuff like a few weeks ago, and he brought up a really salient point as far as zombies go. He said, the problem with the zombie is that they've lost their niche, because originally they were kind of an unstoppable undead monster that, it didn't matter. It wouldn't retreat. It wouldn't run away. It would just chase you down and then would never get tired. But the problem is because GM stopped using morale checks and, just common sense on how to run an encounter, all monsters became zombies because they would never back off or run or anything. It's like people would get into fights with.
Have a morale any sort of morale system in my game. But I look at that as more of a consequence of something else.
Mm-hmm. The computer games and stuff.
Well, you shouldn't need a morale system. The morale system is GM with common freaking sense.
The morale system. The idea of a morale system is a carryover from wargaming, and I instead have, and some people have. This was more part of an infamous misinterpretation. Think that the bestiary, the enemy intel field guide, is the same as like a monster manual. What it is a reflection of the fact that before we even made any monsters, we made a monster / NPC creation system, one that has a scaling level approach, and then built 200 pre-gens off of it. Basically, 200. Every one of the monsters is built on that system, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff together and calling it a day. So if and we've made it clear that the ones in there are just one potential example. It's very easy to switch stuff around with the existing monsters or create your own from scratch if you want to. And since we don't do anything like challenge rating, and we have a auto scaling stat setup, you could use that at level 1 or level 20 as you see fit.
That's a good idea, actually. I wish kind of more games had scaling setups like that, because the only other thing we really had to work with from there, from what I remember, was 3rd edition D&D, where it's like, after you get your base monster, you start stacking on, their class levels, and all of a sudden those things start getting dangerous.
I've never been a fan of challenge rating. I feel it makes too many assumptions. But if you look at the monster example on the itch page, with the entry of the bomb, behemoth, curl, and Tonberry, you see that big chart at the top of each entry. That is what I mean by the scaling level setup.
Let me see if I can find it. Oh, okay. Yeah, hang on. Let me put it up for folks who haven't gotten this yet. And by the way, if you should get it because it's free. Why wouldn't you? Okay, so yeah, I see you. It's got APL, and then it has all their stats as it goes down. That is a great idea.
So
I wish more systems did that.
The only major system, this was heavily inspired by a 3rd edition hack called Fantasy Craft, made by Crafty Games, that was really, really good when it came to this and did this exact thing in a certain way. Because the thing is, we have different tiers of progression for each of those stats, initiative, HP, and all that. So what you see here is when those particular grades are put together for these particular monsters. And because of that, APL is short for average party level, but you don't have to use that level if you don't want to. So if you've got a party of level 5ers, but you want something weaker to mix with something stronger, you could, for example, with the Tonberry, you could have it that the Tonberry's using the level 3 stats instead of 5. I should note we don't do experience. Experience is milestone based. The strength of monsters comes not from the raw numbers per se, but their complexity. Because instead of loot, you have the treasure dice thing. The more stuff that you add onto a monster, the more treasure dice would be generated when taking it out.
Nice.
It's kind of in that mix of pips and dice that you see in like D6. Each individual one just adds +1. Once it reaches a certain threshold, depending on the difficulty, it adds a whole dice.
That's really fun. That's an idea I'd like to see adapted to other games. That's cool. I like that.
The other thing, you can see the whole immunities and resistances set up. A lot of our buffs and debuffs are built around duration. A number of turns that it's active. But
and of course, elemental weaknesses and powers.
Yeah, and when it comes to weaknesses, we have a whole system for damage modification that is not just a static change. We want to avoid a lot of number go up or number go down kind of effects, especially with how we design feats. Very few of the feats just add plus whatever to a certain stat. They more often than not add some new trick that you can do with what you have. And when it comes to that damage modification, for example, reduction, that doesn't reduce the total damage, it reduces one of the dice you roll. So if you roll if on curl you cast Blizzard and do say 2d6 damage, one of those d6 is automatically a 1. And if it's reduction 2, then both of them are 1s. If it was vulnerability instead, then they'd be 6s. Vulnerability maxes out that die. And you have things like damage spiking, which just reduces damage reduction, or things like damage protection, where it's a certain number, usually between 5 and 15, and you have to roll that natural number or higher, otherwise you don't hit. So if someone's got damage reduction 10 ice and you try and hit with an ice spell, you got to roll if you roll a 9 or less, it's not hitting. Period.
And then even if it is, it's getting reduced by 10 points.
No, with protection, if protection's triggered and you roll too low, it does not hit. It does not hit. It's an automatic
at all. Yeah. Okay, that could be. I could see that getting be pretty brutal. And incidentally, we're coming up on an hour and a half. I want to be mindful of your time and everybody else's.
Yeah.
Panel, you guys, are there any questions you got to ask Mildra before we close out, or?
I think I got most of my stuff in.
And Castor, you're muted again.
Yep, I do that a lot. Nothing that comes to mind outside of having yet to actually get my hands dirty with the system yet. So I think there'll be some questions once I get up to my elbows in it.
I'm really surprised if your buddy doesn't decide to play it. What's his name? I've forgotten. Yours, Castor.
Yeah.
Tabletop. Junkie.
Junkie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't exactly a huge Final Fantasy fan. He does like tabletop games, though. I do have some other friends who I think would have a bit of interest in this system. This one I might have to pass around and kind of give a few more nods in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, you could always play test it out and then air your findings up on your channel so people can hear about it.
I've already seen even before this full release, I was already seeing at least one person do actual plays on the game. So given the lack of questions, for a bit of a fun aside, I'd like to put things to the test a little bit, if you guys don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like you to think of one character from any sort of video game or manga. Give me which one it is. Make sure it's a character I can actually look up. I'm not doing some comic book character from Gold Key Comics or something like that. And I will tell you what I would probably pick for the class and job combination.
Oh, okay.
And I've done this kind of thing before on streams. I call it the Pick 5 challenge. It's just
Okay.
going one each.
Well, I'll give you. Hey, we got a Ralts.
You guys are still running. Okay, I told you I'd be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you, dude.
Mm-hmm.
They were asking me about zombie games, and I said, well, Year of the Zombie is still my favorite.
You know what? I actually found the old files.
You got to send me a batch of those. I probably have them already, but
Yeah. I thought about doing them again, but then I took a look at the current state of the market and was like, no.
I mean, considering what some people are self-publishing on Drive-Thru RPG these days, I'm pretty sure it would be a big hit.
Well, I'd have to fold the Die 20 Modern book into it.
Yeah, either that or you just have to go with a whole new system.
Yeah.
But
do it.
Yeah, I mean, just go OSR with it.
I haven't been able to find the Survivor's Guide to Risen America, though.
I have it.
Because there was like 50 of them.
I don't have all 50 of them, but I have a bunch of them. I'll send them over to you.
The majority of them were never published.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of them. I'll send them over to you.
At the end, he really dropped the ball. They were concentrating on other stuff, which is funny considering I'm what made the company at the first place. And then they just started, dropping the ball and everything. I'd be like, hey, here's 3 books ready to go. And they'd never put them out.
I remember it was a long time between releases, like an ungodly amount of time between releases sometimes.
Routes, if you do put it out there, I will find some way to drag you into the monastery to talk about it.
I think we all will.
Part of me thinks I should, that I should just get off my ass and do it myself.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, yes, you do have another Year of the Zombie fan here. Esoteric Order of Nerdity also recognized Year of the Zombie and wants a copy again.
Yeah.
But okay, let's see, Mildred. As to your challenge, I guess I'll go first and give everybody else like a chance to kind of come up with a character. But mine's easy. Kenshiro, the Fist of the North Star.
It's funny you bring him up because I actually tackled Kenshiro and Jagi in the past because when I did this Pick 5 challenge, I had extended it as well to a dear friend of mine. You may have met him, Joel T. Clark.
Yes, in fact, he's a panelist when he shows up on our show.
Cut him some slack. He's all the way up in Alaska.
Yeah.
He's got to fight the mooses to get the internet.
Or the polar bears. I don't know if you saw, but Grim Jim actually ran a one-shot of Lone Wolf Fists for me, and I basically played a Kenshiro character.
I mean, one of the schools is basically Kenshiro in all but name. But
yes,
I have a long history with Lone Wolf Fists. I did recently interview him for Acid and Steel. That's going to be interesting. Him and I are big fans of Exalted, and we're very vocal about how Exalted 3rd edition kind of missed the point.
You should check out Godbound by Kevin Crawford.
I have.
Yes,
I have it. I reviewed it. I spoke about it very, very positively. Crawford is somebody who I tried to do an interview with, but he doesn't take interviews, which is sad.
Same problem.
Because I really wanted to talk with him about the Without Number. I guess now it's a quartet.
Yeah, because the 4th book is coming out, if not the end of this month, then next month.
But so Kenshiro. Putting aside the fact that I could make it a joke of it's what happens when you throw Mad Max and Bruce Lee into a blender.
Yeah.
So there are obviously we have to go with Warrior. You know, Warrior has the highest amount of HP progression and the lowest MP progression. Warrior also has the limit break of Action Surge, which lets you make a weapon attack without using your action, though you can only do it once per round. I should note I don't have limit breaks as any sort of uber attack because that would be one more gauge to track, and I thought having limit breaks as a cheat would be more interesting, as well as reinforce the themes of all of the jobs and classes. So the first job, it has to be monk. That's obviously a given. Especially given the way blitz forms work, as well as Mildra, because monk. Some people have argued monk is overtuned, but it is built on a very tight loop.
They suplex trains, damn it.
Yes, we do have suplex. Suplexes is a mudra, but monks are built around their chakra resource. You perform blitzes, which are these kind of 3-hit attacks. They don't do additional damage, but the more hits you do, the more extra effect you get. A successful blitz gives you chakra. You can cap out at 7. It lets you it gives you a static modifier, but also you spend chakra to perform mudras, and then the cycle repeats. Do blitzes to get chakra, spend chakra to use mudras, then you use blitzes so you can get more chakra back, and the loop just gets tighter. So that's the first job, is monk. The second job is going to be, I would say, knight. Now, the reason I'm going with knight is Hokuto Shinken is all about pressure points that gradually disable before the infamous "you're already dead" kind of thing.
Yes.
the way break arts work for knights is that it puts a situational cap on natural die rolls. So, for example, power break makes it so that when that target tries to do weapon attack rolls, the highest they can roll is 18. As the next tier of it at third circle, it caps at 15. Then it caps at 12. This is a special debuff that knights have. The third job that I would go with is I know it'd be tempting to go with Berserker given some of the scenes in the anime, but instead I'm going with Weapon Master. Now, Weapon Master and Fighter are two ends of the spectrum. Fighter is meant to be the walking arsenal. Think of like Firion in Dissidia, where he's got different weapons that he uses in all of his combos.
Right.
Okay.
The Weapon Master focuses on one particular weapon, but they can get more out of the tag system with that weapon. And within the equipment section, we have a sidebar about interpreting the way weapons can be designed to create martial arts styles. And because of that, it would be relatively easy to have Hokuto Shinken as just a quote unquote weapon.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, if I was to use one of the examples, the one I would probably use is probably Kempo, which has the tags brutal, piercing, and wounding. Brutal just means that when you roll ones on damage, you re-roll. Piercing removes 1 degree of damage reduction. Actually, I have to take that back. What it does is, for the purposes of generating extra effort, which is how you do additional damage when you do hit, the defense is treated as 5 less than normal. But the damage die is reduced by 1 step that you use. Now that's not going to really matter because you're dealing with a character whose accuracy by volume in terms of hitting.
Yeah.
And extra effort is basically if you hit certain thresholds above the target's defense, you add 1d4 to the damage. With light weapons, it's every 3 points. With heavy weapons, it's every 5 points. So you have that dynamic of light weapons can do a lot of damage, but not consistently. Heavy weapons have a higher floor with the damage, but a lower ceiling. And obviously, since we're dealing with martial arts styles, it is going to be a physical meta type, and it is going to be the close template. So it's D6, technically D4 because of piercing. So you're going to be rolling a lot of caltrops.
Well, I have to, like I said, I'd have to see it all in action to really grade it. But it's cool the fact that you've got it figured out that way. But we are out of time as it is. So
you're not going to do my anime character.
You could put him on your show.
I'll say you know who mine is. He has to be one. Even if I wanted to pick somebody else, it has to be one on this show.
MD Geist.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Geist. How can you make Geist the most dangerous soldier?
That was one of the best animes at the time. Except the worst part is
the plot.
When I saw it, that end card was all in Japanese, so I still to this day have no idea what that end card said.
Neither does anybody else. It's probably just nonsense in Japanese too.
Hey, watch us really piss these Americans off. Just put random shapes up there.
I will just get it out there very quickly. Fighter, Magitech Knight, Berserker.
There you go.
Warrior class. There's your 3.
There you go.
There you go. He's a Magitech Knight, baby.
Well, he's something. I'm not. I keep saying this. Now I'm going to do it tonight. Okay, Daniel. I'm gonna pull that sucker off the shelf and I'm going to watch it again just for you. Okay. So
I apologize
I see
to you
you
in advance.
Why?
Well,
It's on my shelf. I thought enough of it to buy it. So.
So did I. Like I said, I'm going to watch it too. And Death Force.
Yeah, that's the one I have. Yeah, MD Geist Death Force.
That's the
It's
first
the
one,
director's
right?
cut.
No, the first one is MD Geist, and then there's MD Geist Death Force.
Is that the one with the
Hold
dumbass
on.
ending?
there you go. Really narrow it down. A Central Park Media imported anime from the early '90s in the ultraviolence era that's got a really dumb ending. You really narrowed it down for
That's
us.
the case. You may as well throw in Armor Hunter.
I don't want to
I don't know
spoil
if
it
has
for
a dumb
anybody.
ending because it doesn't really have a plot.
Well,
Okay.
the statute's passed.
Is that when MD Geist meets the other MD, and the other MD is this dipshit that accidentally kills the kid at the end?
That's right.
Oh, these are soundtracks.
Yeah, that was stupid. I was
Yeah.
disappointed. I was very disappointed.
MD Geist, the director's cut, and Death Force. That's the one you need. It's got both of them.
Yep, this is the one. It's got them both on there. It's old, but it's still serviceable. I don't know who else is going to use it.
Did they ever make a third one?
No, I don't think they ever made a third. I don't think it was that good.
They didn't
You
make
take
a
that
third.
back right now.
It has if you're an American ultraviolence anime fan, it has a song called Violence of Flame that sums up everything you need to know about watching anime in the early 90s, renting stuff from Blockbuster.
Oh, well, you know what? That's on the soundtrack. Here,
It certainly is. And that is, as my best friend and I used to sing it, it went violence, it was violent, it was dangerous, most dangerous, Japanese, violence. That's literally how the lyrics go. If you listen to it, it's dangerous, most dangerous, a bunch of Japanese, and then violence.
Okay, I'm gonna load that up on. I'm gonna load that up in the media for StreamYard. The next time you come on, I'm just gonna play it for you. So.
I'm down. I used to have Genocyber's theme as my ringtone, but no, MD Geist.
Oh,
In flames, let's go.
And now we know the face of the next copyright claims.
Genocyber made me so sad because it was like I read the comic book and the comic book was really good, but then they stopped bringing it out after the first issue, and then the anime dropped, and the anime is nothing like the comic book. So I'm just kind of like, what?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Welcome to my world. Is a big fan of Blame.
Oh boy, yeah. How did you feel about that Netflix version?
If I'm being honest,
study and wasted potential.
Blame, I do not think is something that can work in animation. Period.
Well, we don't have a lot of time to jump into that. Like I said, we got to go. But Mildra, thanks for coming on and talking to us about your game. And I hate to say, I hope you sell a bunch of copies because it's not for sale. It's for giveaway. But I hope you give away a bunch of copies, and I hope a lot of people start playing it and putting your name in it. And I look forward to seeing what else you put out.
Oh yeah, I'm certainly always doing something in some form or fashion. As Routes can attest, I am a massive workaholic on that front, since I'm always interviewing somebody. I have been on a crusade for the last 10 years of I'm going to drown every single motherfucker out there in high quality games and high quality indies out there until no one can say that nobody's making good games without lying out their ass.
There you go. It's a good way to do it. Yep. Well, all right, everybody out there in YouTube land. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us. And if you're on X, thanks for hanging out with us twice as much. We got 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
But until Saturday, y'all take care. Have a great week in Geek.